With great power comes great responsibility.
Compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move. It is your duty to plant yourself like a tree. Look them in the eye and say no. You move.
Never step onto the battlefield of ideas unprepared. Before you enter the fray, you need a plan. And there's no better place to get one than right here on Tactics with host Caleb Colquitt. The Situation Room goes live now on News Radio 1440.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being with us right here on Tactics, whether you're watching on Facebook Live, on YouTube, on Twitch, on Periscope. We're on all the platforms now, so if you're not watching us, that's on you. So thank you so much for being with us right here on Tactics with News Radio 1440, where speech isn't violence, tolerance isn't love, and disagreement isn't hate. Now, we have a very special program for you today. This is something that we try to do and support this event every year, and we have a special guest coming on here. She's somebody that if you have been paying any attention to radio in Montgomery for a while, you probably know her as Jenny Johnston. But she is now Jenny Dodson, if I'm getting that correct. And really happy to have her with us. She is a fellow cancer survivor like me, different kind of cancer, but a cancer survivor. And she's here to talk to us about an event that will be helping a lot of people with cancer. So welcome to the program, Jenny.
Thanks for having me, Caleb. You're really sweet. Yeah, I was on with another local talk show host for several years. So everybody, if they do know me, they're going to know me as Jenny Johnston. But in 2016, I got married January 23rd, I think. Yes. I'm terrible. Isn't that awful?
It's odd that the woman doesn't know when the date is.
I know. No, chemo brain is still kind of lingering. It just rears its ugly head every now and then. But
yeah, my fans know that's a real thing because they remember my shows when I was on chemo.
Yeah, right. I'm glad I wasn't.
Brain fog going on.
I know. I couldn't come up with words like skirt, grass. You just can't. Where is the word? Yeah. Anyway, so there's a little bit still hanging on. Anyway, so this event that I'm promoting is to support a really great, I want to call it a ministry. I mean, it's a non-for-profit 501c3 called Women of Hope. Mm-hmm. And they basically have support group meetings for women who have just been diagnosed, who are going through chemo, right, who are, in remission or survivors, family members, friends, anyone can go. It's the third Tuesday of every month at Fraser. But they've got their annual signature luncheon coming up. They raise money once a year. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be at the MC Suites Hotel a week from today. So October 7th, doors open at 11 and lunch is served at 11:30. So, and you can buy tickets online. I'll tell you how to do that in a minute. But,
right, we'll get to that.
Yeah, they were the first organization that really came to support me. And, before you start chemo, you have no idea what you're in for.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Even somebody like me that had family members that went through it that kind of saw that, unless you are really close to somebody, and I mean like living in the house, you really have no idea.
No. And when we both went through it, it's like you don't understand the horribleness. Mm-hmm. That's what Rhonda Walker nicknamed it. The horribleness is when you feel it hit. Mine hit like 3 days after treatments, and it would last about 3 days and, pain levels at 10. If you let it get there, but don't be afraid of pain medicine. Anyway, I don't tell horror stories. I will say a few things like white blood cell count was, nothing twice. Red blood cell count was nothing once. Blood transfusion, anyone?
See, I thank God I never had to go through that.
Yeah, it was you feel better within about 2 hours. 90% of people feel better instantly. But I didn't know why I was getting so tired just walking from the couch to the kitchen sink. And it's because I had no red blood cells, and that's what carries oxygen to your muscles and your brain.
Right.
So I called, some Women of Hope ladies. What's wrong with me? And they're like, you need to go get some blood work done and let them check your red blood cell count. So they're just it's not just care packages. They'll sit with you at treatment. If you don't have anybody to go with you, they'll help with meals. They pray with you to support you. They pray with you even if you aren't even with them. I mean, it's just wonderful. So this is their one-time annual thing. And since I know you and I used to be in radio, I'm like their spokesperson on the radio.
Right.
Kind of, going, this is really great. They were there for me. And anyway, so I get married. I'm ADD too. I need to be on Ritalin, probably that or Adderall or something. So I get married January 2016, and 3 months later in April, I'm diagnosed with stage 3, almost stage 4 breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so our first about year and a half of marriage was all about chemo and cancer and lots of prayer.
You talk about a trial by fire for a new marriage.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I thought that I knew how much I loved God and how much he loved me until he allowed me to get cancer. He didn't give it to me because cancer's from Satan himself.
Oh, yes. And anyone that's been through it will attest to that. Even an atheist will be like,
I know. It's like, this is terrible. So once the first chemo kicked in after the second round, because I had Adriamycin, which is nicknamed the Red Devil, and it's a syringe about that wide, 2 of them, and it's actually red. And they have to manually push it into your port, and they have to wear a hazmat suit because if one thing splashes on the nurse doing it, she'll get the symptoms. So, and they have to do it
very
really,
potent.
yes. So that's the kicker. That's what makes your hair fall out. That's what makes, I lost all 10 fingernails too. And so it was like bloody and proud flash. And yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. So one time I was so weak on the couch. I had just showered, and Rad is holding me up in the shower, washing me because I just couldn't do it. I just was so weak. He would sit me down on the side of the tub and bandage each one with Band-Aids so I could sleep, because you can't reach in your purse. You can't tuck in your pockets. You can't do the laundry because it would touch. And so now we know why God gave us fingernails.
Yeah,
they're important.
See, with me it was eyelashes, because you don't realize how much stuff your eyelashes keep out of your eyes until they're not there.
Eyebrows too.
Well, that too, yeah.
Yeah, and nose hair. Even after my nose hair grew back, it's still running. I'm afraid to lean over. It's gonna drip out my nose.
See, that I never lost.
You didn't lose your nose hair.
I would have been fine with losing that, but no, I lost my beard, I lost my head hair, I lost my eyebrows. That stayed. I don't know why that stayed.
Everything was gone with me. I mean, it was Adriamycin was the kicker. I had 8 weeks of that every other week because of my size and my gender, and it would have done more harm if I had it weekly.
Yeah.
So the second round that lasted 8 weeks. So that was 4. After 2 weeks is when my hair started falling out. I don't really want to see it in the shower base or on my pillow. So on my birthday 2 years ago, we had a head shaving party. My sister, my mom, my sister-in-law, my future daughter-in-law, my youngest son, my husband, and my best friend all came. It was on my birthday, so they were bringing wine, of course. Whatever. I know you don't drink, but
that's fine.
She shaved my head. It was harder on her, really. And then we learned how to tie pretty scarves. I cried, for a little while, and then that was done. So once I was done with that, it's like, okay, that's done. What next? So, but the Women of Hope, honestly, Patty Barnes showed up at work, and I didn't know her. I was like, what's this for? She goes, I'm Patty Barnes, and I'm with Women of Hope. And it was this big, care package with journaling and devotionals and even pads to write notes down on, pink pencils, pink Q-tips.
Pink Q-tips.
Yeah,
I didn't even know they made those.
They do. I'm a little tired of the color pink, but whatever.
Well, just so you know, I know you can't see it, but through the magic of internet, we actually have the big pink ribbon and your name in pink and everything on the screen. Yeah, it's up there somewhere.
I know, I can't see it. Obviously, I'm looking at it like a light switch. That's cool.
But anyway, so we're not trying to overload you with pink, but there is going to be some pink on this.
That's fine. I have a lot of pink.
I would have worn pink, but I don't own any pink.
I'm just kidding. I'm really not that tired of it. I actually look pretty good in it. Yeah. So the women, she showed up at work. And she said, well, my friend Jody Barr told me about the fact that you were just diagnosed, because I had just been diagnosed like a week earlier. I still had my hair. And here comes this sweet lady who came during my lunch hour with all this stuff, her card, all this stuff for Women of Hope, and telling me about the support group meetings. They'll go to treatment with you. They'll pray with you. They'll come to your house, bring you a meal. I mean, anything that they'll explain things to, because you don't have a clue how you're really going to react to the chemo, because everybody gets a different chemo. Like yours was different than mine.
Mine was very different. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people that haven't been there don't realize. first of all, every cancer is different and every cancer patient is different. So
Yes.
you can read all you want, you can do all the research, you still don't know what it's going to be like. And I'm not just talking about minute nuance differences, wild differences between patients.
Right.
So because it's very much a new science.
Well,
But
yeah.
but I will say this, even though that is true, it really does help having people around you like you're talking about with programs that have been through it that can help you kind of navigate that thing. You can learn from their experience. And a lot of people don't think about it this way. Chemo treatment is not in a hospital typically. And so it's not like a hospital where you have meals brought to you and all that stuff, but you are hooked up to this thing you can't leave. And so having somebody that can get you a meal or something is really important.
It is. And actually at the cancer center here, you were at the one in Prattville. I was the one here in Montgomery. You're in a recliner and you just, because it's freezing in there, you bring your blanket and all that stuff. I'm sorry, I keep hitting that.
That's okay.
Okay. But
I mean, we're talkers. We talk with our hands.
Okay. Yes, I do. So my porch gone, that got infected after the first thing. And so I put it out on Facebook. I was very open on Facebook the whole time, either for prayer or to encourage other women. And I was getting it from Women of Hope, my mom, my best friend, my sister, my whole family, and my church body was incredible. I mean, they came and did the yard for us. There's no way I could do that. Then I lose my job in the middle of chemo. And I start my own business out of the house, sitting in my little kitchen nook, painting. I painted you a little.
Yes, you did.
I have Superman on it.
I have my Superman. I have it to this day. I still use it. So
good. I did one for another one with the Army Ranger on it. Coffee mug though.
Okay. Yeah. For Kevin.
Right, Kevin Hawkins.
Right.
So and at least I was stationary. The sunshine's coming in. It was very therapeutic, as Barney Fife would say. But you just kind of scoop yourself up and do what you got to do. And you obviously know about that too. So the Women of Hope, the one thing I would tell people when they were first diagnosed, because they would contact me a lot. I heard about you, Jenny. I've been reading your story. You're such an inspiration. And I would always give God the glory. It says, do not fear or fear not. I think like 365 times in scripture.
I'm not sure how many it is, but it's a lot.
It's 365 because I remember, because there's 365 days in the year.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of made sense to me, or helped. So
right,
he did miraculously take away fear and worry from me. I just did what I had to do and listened to the Women of Hope. One thing I did tell anyone who was newly diagnosed: do not Google anything. You will get half truth, just a flat out lie, or horror stories. And I'm not going to react the way this woman might react because she is 67 years old, or this young lady's 23 years old. Her family history is different. She's on a totally different regimen than me. So she might not have, not many lose their fingernails. I did,
Mine got real weak and I came close to losing one of them. But that's another thing that people need to understand as well, that even if you're on the same chemo treatment, you may be getting it on a different schedule, or they may be spacing it out, and there's just so many variables that can cause so much difference. And so I agree 100%. If you do talk to somebody that's been through it, you just have to be aware of that. And also it helps to have a face-to-face, because you're not just going to be getting the cold light of the computer screen.
Right. Well, and then some people you don't need to talk to, because one lady called me and just wanted to tell me all these horror stories of she's crawling across the floor, and I'm like, what? And Rhonda Walker was the first outside the family person I called. And she was like, don't listen to horror stories. Everyone's different. I will say it's horrible. And that's what she left it at. She goes, it's horrible. And when you feel it hit, make sure you're at home. And I wasn't at home. So I listened to her after that.
I wasn't either. I did the same thing.
Yeah. Because you don't know how it's going to feel, but you can feel it. That feeling when it hits, you're going, something's going on here. I need to get in bed.
Yeah. No one has to tell you. It happens, and you know it.
Yeah.
But with me, it was actually at work. I was in the middle of a broadcast, and luckily it was towards the end of my show. I finished up and I got home. But I mean, I was working. Joe will tell you this story. My first day of chemo, I showed up the day after to finish up some work and do a show for the next day. So I mean, Yeah, and you know this too.
Mm-hmm.
It usually hits you a few days after the first dose anyway. Like I felt fine after my first one.
I did too after each one, except the last 3 months. I had it every week, and it's called Taxol.
Mm.
And it's not the bone crushing pain, but it's still awful pain and weakness and stuff. And then the Neulasta shot, I think they need to be sued for false advertising. They say it may cause minor bone ache. Oh,
Really?
no, it's like a vice grip because you can feel your bones expanding, releasing the white blood cells and red blood cells because the chemo's depleting everything.
Huh.
And unless you take your pain medicine before it gets to an 8 or 9, if you take it when it gets to be an 8 or 9, you can bring it down to a 7, but it ain't going any lower, and you're stuck with that pain for 18, 20 hours. So needless to say, I was not afraid of pain medicine after that. But that's another question I had for the Women of Hope. Patty, or Rhonda, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Help me out. What is going on? Take your pain medicine, Jenny. It was 6 hours late. They forgot to call it in.
Oh,
but, yeah. So, but that was fine. I mean, the support groups are really awesome. And the thing that is a week from today, the signature luncheon.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the details on that.
Well,
what's that like?
It's just a big luncheon at the Embassy Suites Hotel. You get a lunch. Carol Golson, who is a breast cancer survivor, is going to be the speaker. And $35. Go online to thewomenofhope.org. And that's how you need to do it online too, because it's going to be sold out. You can't get it at the door. I doubt it.
So obviously don't tell us everything because we want to save something for the luncheon, but just give us a brief overview. What's her story? Why is she the keynote speaker there?
Well, she was bitten by the bug to help and to organize something that would be, she carried the torch for several other women who had done it in the past, but she does this event. And
I gotcha.
Breast cancer survivor. So she's a survivor. So she's past the 5 years. I'm just in remission because I haven't gotten there, but
same here.
Yeah. So we're technically in remission because once you get to that 5-year mark is when, 85 or 90% of us do not have it recur.
Yeah.
And so right now,
and luckily mine's really high. So I'm hoping to get to that 5 point because there's virtually no chance it comes back after 5 years.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm still at 45% chance for the next 2 years, but 2 months, December 9th, I will be 3 years in remission and my blood work looks fine other than osteoporosis and some osteopenia, which is softening.
By the way, what was it, about a year ago you had a scare on that or something?
I did. I should have had a double mastectomy and I did not, and found a lump in my right breast. The left breast is the one that had the cancer, and I found a lump that felt funny and they took me back. And the first time they took me back when I was initially diagnosed in 2016, just go in for a regular mammogram because of the lump. The doctor said, go see Dr. Strickland. Well, or no, it was another doctor. Anyway, so she said, the text said, if I see anything on it, I'm going to, if she sees anything on it, she'll have another one. Well, she came back and she said she wants another one. And she goes, okay, now I'm going to show her this one. And if she wants to see something else, if she's still concerned, she's going to want an ultrasound. Well, this is the same visit. She wanted an ultrasound. And then she was like, no, we need to biopsy this because there's definitely something bad going on. So they did the biopsy, which is really loud too. And 3 days later, I got the call at work saying, Jenny, can you step outside? And your heart just sinks. It starts pounding and you walk outside. She says, I've got bad news. It's both in the lymph nodes and in your left breast. And, I didn't even know this, but Women of Hope helped with this. I could pick my own oncologist. I could pick my own anesthesiologist, my own plastic surgeon if I chose to have reconstruction, which I did. I mean, at the time I was 49, I'd been married, 3 months. So I did choose to do the reconstruction, which is about a year-long process.
And I've heard that's about as bad as any of the rest of it.
It's a lot of just localized pain, but what they do is in your pectoral muscle, and they'll put cadaver skin in there too, but there's an expandable bag in there. It's called a skin expander bag, and it's empty, but they fill it every 2 weeks with more and more saline, because literally it's an amputation. You have no nipple, you have nothing. I mean, it's just they have cut it off and pulled the skin together.
Right.
So they let that heal because you don't want it to crack open, and little by little they stretch your skin out, but it's hard as a rock by the time it's done about 9 months later, and then you have to let it sit for 3 months, and it's up to your collarbone, it's under your arm, and it presses on your rib cage. It's hard to breathe. By the time it's at the end, the pain from it's hard to sleep too. But that's a whole nother if somebody chooses to do that. But yeah, I had a scare and it was nothing. It turned out just to be a fibroid thing. And that happened actually twice. So
I only heard about one, but we're really grateful that it was nothing more than that.
Yep.
So this thing is, as you said, October the 7th. It's going to be at 11:30.
The lunch is at 11:30. Doors open at 11.
Doors open at 11.
And go to thewomenofhope.org, and you can. It's really easy. You just click buy a ticket. And, $35, and that even if you can't go, you can still donate. I mean, I wouldn't buy a ticket if you can't go because that's a chair that somebody can't sit in. But
same URL, same website. You can donate there.
Yes, yeah, that's the Women of Hope thing too. So you can donate there. You can navigate through it. It's very navigable, but it's just this fantastic group of ladies. And once you get diagnosed, you really don't know what to ask, and you really don't want to Google either. And I was afraid to Google because I was like, I'm going to hear these awful stories, and then some of them are just not true. So I just listened to my doctor and my nurse practitioners and did what they said to do, and prayed a lot. And at the end of every post on Facebook, I would say Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, and I will uphold you with my righteous right hand, which is Isaiah. So that righteous right hand is the Jesus of the Old Testament. And I would say, draw your sword out, lean forward, and charge full speed ahead into battle with the angels surrounding you and Jesus walking right with you. And just have no fear. Take courage, no matter what you're going through. If your child, something goes on with that, I just really wanted to encourage them and to glorify God in such a bigger way than I ever knew possibly could imagine. I mean, He is so good all the time, and I get teary, so I'm going to try to stop that right now.
No, I actually came up with a similar analogy, and part of it is because I'm such a combat-minded person. That's kind of where I did martial arts for a long time, that kind of thing. So I think that way.
That.
Yeah.
It's a battle.
Yeah.
And it's a marathon battle.
One of the analogies that I use pretty commonly is that God gives the strongest warriors the heaviest swords.
Yes.
And so we've got more to carry, but it also means we can do more good.
Right. And if the fire doesn't burn you up like wood,
right,
it's going to hone you like steel.
Absolutely.
Just, the little boy goes up to the the silversmith, and he's still pounding away at the silver, and the little boy goes, sir, how do you know when you're finished? And he said, when I can see my image in it.
Ah, that's a great story.
Yeah. So, we're being pressed like lumps of coal, and we all know what those turn out to be.
Eventually, yes. Diamonds.
That's right. So,
well, thank you so much for being with us, Jenny. We appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate you letting me come in. I really do. And
I'm going to get any excuse to talk to you. You know that.
Oh, you're so sweet. Well, today my oldest son turned 27.
Oh, well, happy birthday to him.
Yeah, got corporal in the Marine Corps and married with a child now. So I got to see my 50th birthday and my first grandchild.
Yeah, I actually have a friend named Brandy who just had her birthday this week, and it was her first one since, and it was her 40th. So her 40th birthday was her first one
my
after.
My 50th was mine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Rad threw me a surprise birthday party at Eastside Grill.
See, mine was close. Idea. 29 was my first one afterwards. So
okay, well,
it was almost 30.
You're to the big 3-0. You're there now?
I'm there now, yes.
You're supposed to be like 23,
I know.
20, perpetually,
Well, you were one of the early, I think it was before I even had my own show that I did a show with you when we were filling in for Mark Montiel that one time.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I think that was before I even had my own show. Like you were one of the first people that I had as a co-host on that show too.
I think so.
That was real early in my radio career.
Wow, that was fun. I do remember that now.
Yep.
Oh, it's funny. I'm getting old.
Well, thank you so
But
much.
at least I'm getting old.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. Give us the details on that event one more time, and then we'll take it out.
Okay, October 7th, Monday, 1 week from today, Embassy Suites Hotel downtown, Tallapoosa Street. Tickets are $35 on thewomenofhope.org. And
that Embassy Suite, that's the brand new one that just opened?
it's the really, you can't miss it.
Yeah, right across from the Impact.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it's really nice. And so Carol Golson's going to be the speaker. She's a breast cancer survivor too. She's got a great testimony. And actually, their support group meets that next Tuesday at Fraser. And my oncologist, Dr. Stephen Davidson, is going to be the speaker. So answering any questions these ladies have, they bring in the oncologist. So anyway, anyone can contact me too on Facebook as Jenny Hershman-Dodson. And you can private message me, and I'm happy to pray with you and talk you through it. I've had countless, I'd say maybe 30 women contact me, and some husbands too. What am I supposed to do? That kind of
I can
thing.
understand how that would be terrifying. I mean, the people around me, I'm single, but my dad was freaking out. Like he didn't know what he was supposed to do. So.
Yeah, I felt worse for the caregivers because they just, there's nothing they can do other than give you your medicine on time.
Right.
But I was still working, going to chemo.
No, same here. I was still doing a show the whole time.
Well, it doesn't hit for a few days. So what are you going to do? Sit on your tail? I can't do that. And then it hits, and you know that you're going to be at home and you're going to have the horribleness. And there's a maid service here in town that's specifically good. It's called Cleaning with a Cause. And it's specifically for cancer patients who need help cleaning their house.
Well, that's cool. I didn't know that, but I'm glad we slipped that little plug in there.
I know.
People doing good work.
Cleaning for a cause.
All right. Thank you so much, Jenny. We'll go to a break, and we'll be right back.
And now for a reading from the Social Justice Warrior Bible with Pastor Gregory Post.
Welcome in. I'm Gregory Post, head pastor at the Eternal Living Word Trans-Denominational Community Church and Coffee House in Novato, California. And now it's time once again for another reading of the SJW Bible. Today's story is going to be about how Naaman was cured of his leprosy in 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 8 through 14. And it says, "It happened when Elisha, the man and or woman of God, depending on how he identified at the time, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, and he sent word to the king, saying, 'Why have you torn your clothes? Now let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel.' So Naaman came with his horse and his chariots, which were sustainably raised and emitted no greenhouse gases, and stood at the doorway of the house of Elisha. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, 'Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you will be clean.' Not that I'm implying that you were dirty just because you were a leper. That would be leper shaming. But Naaman was furious and went away, saying, 'Behold, I thought, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand all over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Paphra and the rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?' So he turned and went away in rage. Then his servants came near and spoke to him, saying, 'Wow, that Elisha guy is such a xenophobic jerk. Where does he get off implying that the rivers in Israel are better than the rivers in our country? That nationalist jerk probably believes in Israeli exceptionalism too.' So then God spoke to Naaman directly and said, 'Naaman, I am so sorry for being intolerant and not accommodating enough. I should never have asked you to have to go and do something to be cured. You believe in me, and since purification comes from faith only, I'll just go ahead and heal you right here and now.' And from that hour forward, his flesh was cured, and they all went out to try some local craft beer." Wow, so inspirational. Thank you for listening to this reading of the SJW Bible. And remember, the only truth that matters is your truth.
Welcome back, everybody, and thank you so much for being with us here on Tactics. And we, as always, want to thank our special guest today, Jenny, who has many, many last names. You saw on the label there's Hershman, there's Dodson. That's the name that she's known as now. A lot of people that remember her from her radio career, Jenny Johnston. So lots of different names, but the same great lady. And we certainly do appreciate her taking time out of her busy schedule and making the media rounds and giving us some time with that as well. So there's several things that I want to talk about, but I know that the news story that is on everybody's mind is, of course, what's going on in Washington. And we're just going to hit on some of the new developments. We spent a lot of time on this the past 2 days. It's amazing to me how fast things move. And I say this as somebody that was in the news business, and even long before I was in the news business, way before this was my career, I kept up with the news, I watched the news, I made sure that I was up to date on things. Things move so much faster now than they used to, and I really don't think it's rose-colored glasses or nostalgia or anything like that. If you're looking at how quickly we move from one story to the next and one story to the next, how fast that happens, it is happening at a really alarming rate now. And I think that the reason that that is so deadly, so dangerous, is because it's always been a major issue with news that people hear a little snippet or a little soundbite. They hear a little bit of the story, just enough to get them to form an opinion, and then move on to the next one. When we scroll through social media, do we see a story that we're interested in and click on it and actually read the article? Studies show most of the time, no, the average time spent on each news story is only 8 seconds, which means a lot of people are going through, seeing the headline, very quickly forming an opinion, sharing, making maybe one comment, and then moving on. And that is scary because we're intentionally depriving ourselves of information because we're so scared that we might miss another story coming on down the line. And the reason that this is so problematic with this story in particular is because this story has a lot of moving parts. It's kind of complicated, and if you just pay attention to what's going on social media, if you just read the headlines, post, and then move on, regardless of what side of the story you're on, you're going to miss a lot of the important details. Because what this story shows is a systematic problem with our intelligence community and the way that it is functioning. And I'm going to explain. You remember that when we did our analysis the other day, there was one thing in particular that was taking place in that whistleblower complaint that I said, and looking at the information that I had at the time, I would have said exactly the same thing if I had it to do over again. I didn't misspeak. I said that the one thing that is going to cause problems is the claim that is central to this whole thing. Not that Trump did a quid pro quo or a promise, because we already debunked that. We already looked at the call transcript. We can see that that never happened, that the whole Giuliani thing, that it was actually the president of Ukraine, not President Trump, that suggested that. President Trump sent Giuliani over there at the president of Ukraine's request. So all of those claims in the whistleblower, that was debunked when it came to Rudy Giuliani. Everything that he claimed about there being a quid pro quo, that the president was withholding financial aid or military aid or giving something to the Ukrainian president in exchange for looking into his political rival, we found out that that was debunked. We found out that Biden was not at the center of it. His name was only mentioned one time, and it was almost kind of in passing, to be perfectly honest. We found all those things out. And we know that from the transcript. So this guy has thoroughly debunked the one thing that was in his report that I said, all right, this may be a problem for the president. This may be an issue for him. You remember what that was? It was the fact that he was taking the calls and abusing his power, his authority as president, to put unclassified documents that he felt were too sensitive into a separate vault of things that contain classified information. That was the problem. Because regardless of all the things, all the details surrounding it, if he's taking something that is not supposed to be classified and saying, you know what, the media might take this the wrong way. You know what, Congress might take this the wrong way. Even if President Trump was completely innocent and didn't actually do anything wrong, if he's just using this to cover his own tail, and keeping this from Congress and keeping this from the normal channels by putting it into a separate file, that is reserved for classified information when there was nothing classified inside the phone conversation, then that's going to be a big problem for the president. That is still an abuse of power. But even that claim is no longer legitimate, and I'll explain how that was actually debunked over the weekend. Remember, we're only, 5-6 days out from this story breaking, and that already every single piece of this whistleblower complaint has been completely deconstructed. Everything that he was complaining about has been completely taken apart just because we now have information. We now have the transcript of the call, all of those things. So here's the reason that claim no longer holds water. Not to say that it didn't actually happen, just that we now have a reason behind that. They've done this for all the calls. You'll remember that in the whistleblower complaint, the claim that it is making is that President Trump was doing something nefarious, was making a deal with the Ukrainian president to dig up dirt on Joe Biden, and because he knew that was wrong, because he knew it was going to get him in trouble, he says, you know what, guys? That call may be one we've got to put in the classified vault. But it didn't happen. Do you know why it didn't happen? Because they've been doing this with all the calls. Why? You remember back early in his presidency, when it turns out that the media got a hold of several calls that the president was making to different foreign leaders. I think that one of them was the French president, and there was nothing bad in the calls. But the fact is that there is a certain level of privacy that is understood, not privacy from the public forever, but the freedom to speak freely and to not have to worry about the media, not have to worry about the reaction to all this. That is something that the president needs. He, just like the leader of any other nation would, needs the liberty to speak freely with these people over the phone without having to worry about every single word that he's saying being broadcast on the evening news the next night, especially if you're involved in some kind of negotiation or deal. That's really important because you can't be worrying about the political implications of what you're going to say to a foreign leader if that is the case. Now, you can't always completely remove that because there's always the chance that the other guy on the other line decides to go to the media with what you told him. So you can't just assume that whatever you're saying is always going to be kept confidential. But my point is, there is a certain understood executive privilege there that has been enjoyed by every president, including Barack Obama, including Bill Clinton. You go back down the list, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are kept for the sake of reviewing later, and the public can usually get their hands on them after a certain amount of time. But in that moment and the following weeks and months, you're not supposed to have that kind of stuff available to the public because the president needs to be able to speak freely when talking to these foreign leaders. And that's something that, at least at one time, everybody in both parties understood. When that was compromised, and the president could no longer trust his intelligence people, these leaks were getting out left and right, he had to do something to plug the hole. Now, if he broke the rules and is abusing his presidential power to do this still, then I agree that is a problem. But you do have to ask the question, what else was the man supposed to do? If he can't trust the people around him, actually this guy coming out and trying to put this on display is exactly the reason that Donald Trump did what he did, which is, since that time, very early in his presidency, I think that was only a couple months in, if I'm not mistaken, they did this with all the calls. So the idea that this specific call was something nefarious, this specific call was something the president knew there was something bad contained within it, and so he singled this one call out, it's not true. And that claim was central to the point of this complaint. That was the point that he was saying, see, the president, he knows that he's doing this, and because of this, he's trying to keep this information back from Congress. But it's not true, because he was doing it with all his calls. Now, you may still be able to make the case that the president shouldn't be doing that because that is a space that is reserved for confidential information, but you can no longer, because of the new information we now have, make the case that this call was being singled out for that purpose. or that President Trump knew that he was doing something sinister, or that President Trump was making this, trying to convince the Ukrainian president to enter into this deal and was trying to cover his tracks. There is no cover up here, because the same thing was done for all the other calls that the president has made to other foreign leaders. And so that completely debunks that portion, that part of the complaint that was issued by the whistleblower. And I got to be honest, frankly, I don't blame the president. I probably do exactly the same thing in his shoes. And goodness knows, I have been critical of and even made fun of the president for some of the dumb decisions that he's made. But this one, I see where he's coming from. I don't know what other choice the man had other than to maybe make a third space that's reserved for his calls that are not confidential, maybe, but it seems to me like it's the much easier and more practical thing to do exactly what he did, and there's no reason to believe that there was some kind of evil intent or that he was trying to hide something other than being able to enjoy the privileges that every other president that preceded him also enjoyed. Now, here's the second part of this. They were claiming that part of the way that you know that there was nefarious stuff going on was that this is the first time that a whistleblower has ever been held back from Congress, that one of these complaints was hidden from Congress because the president really knew. He knew that what was going to happen is that all this was going to hit the fan and that he was going to be held responsible for it. But it turns out that's not true either, because we've learned even more over the weekend that when you see something like this, you always have to ask if this is really true. If this is the only whistleblower in history that has been held back like this, why is that? Because if the answer is because it was making the president look bad and the president and the inspector general were colluding to try to keep that from getting out into the open, okay, that's a really big problem. But is that the only explanation? Because another one was given that makes a lot of sense. Up until 2018, the FBI rule was that you had to have first-hand information. In fact, when you look at the form that you have to fill out as a whistleblower, it actually said on there was a disclaimer that said, you have to affirm in this complaint that you have first-hand information on this. You cannot just have heard about something and complain about it then. You have to actually be in that department. You have to actually see it. You have to actually know that there is something going on, or at least have reasonable suspicion to file this complaint. This whistleblower didn't have that. He heard something from other people and admits that in his complaint. He admits that I have no first-hand information from this. Every single bit of this complaint I am getting from other people. So what's most likely that was going on here is this is a guy that did not like Trump, that was specifically looking for rumors and innuendo, something to try to bust him, and he probably really believed that it happened. I'm not saying he was insincere, in the sense that he really did probably think that President Trump was doing something wrong. I'm not even questioning his sincerity. But the point is, our intelligence community up until just recently had that rule that nope, no secondhand information. If you want the protection of a whistleblower, that's fine. You have to have firsthand information. And when it comes to this guy, even though all of his information has been thoroughly debunked, I don't think it would be unreasonable for somebody to ask him, hey, these sources, who you been talking to? Who is it that you keep alluding to, different people within the White House staff that are feeding you this stuff? Now, I don't know that he has to answer that. But my point is, shouldn't someone be asking that? Because right now, all we have is an anonymous whistleblower that doesn't even have firsthand information, and that's supposed to be grounds for impeachment? Come on. If this were any other job, if this were your job, and HR comes to you and says, look, Bob, I don't know why your name's Bob, but your name's Bob in this scenario. Look, Bob, yeah, we've been told that you're stealing from the company. Really? Who told you that? Well, we can't tell you, and they didn't actually see you steal. They just heard a rumor around the office that you were stealing from the company. You'd have to say, you've got to be kidding me. You're firing me because you heard that somebody that isn't even in my department heard a rumor that I was stealing? You've got to be outside your mind. Can you at least, investigate, see if maybe it's true or untrue? That would be absolutely insane, but that is what is being suggested by the Democrats right now. That's where we're at. And when it comes to this, that rule that I was talking about, that you had to have firsthand information, that was all changed in 2019. And that change happened in 2018. The change was not announced until 2019. And when was it announced? Just a few days before the breaking of the Mueller report. So they changed the rule a while back, but they didn't make that information public until right before the Mueller report came out. Why is that? It's almost as if there are people inside the intelligence community there in Washington that have it out for the president. Because remember, who would have been running the FBI when this rule change took place? James Comey and other people like Andrew McCabe, that we know for a fact had it in for the president, wanted to bring him down. And it seems almost as though they were currying and desiring rumor and innuendo to get spread around, and for that to be enough to muddy the water and to try to bring the president down. I'm not a guy, and you know this if you've been watching me for any amount of time, I'm not a guy that gets real deep into conspiracy theories, or I don't even really like the term deep state, because it gets overused and misused by a lot of other political pundits. But I mean, if you want people to trust our institutions like the FBI and the CIA and the NSA, and you want them to not believe that there's a deep state, you need to get rid of crap like this, where some rando that just happens to not like the president heard a rumor that he was doing something improper and files a whistleblower complaint based on nothing other than secondhand information that ends in an impeachment inquiry. You have to be outside of your ever-loving mind if you think that that's okay. There is no reason to even look into this because there's no evidence, and we do have hard evidence, the call transcript, that shows the exact opposite of what that whistleblower complaint had. This is why up till now the FBI did not accept whistleblower complaints unless you actually had firsthand information, because they didn't want to chase ghosts. They didn't want to swat at flies that weren't there. It's a waste of taxpayer money, and it's a waste of time. Look, if President Trump actually does something wrong, I'll be the first one to call him out. Believe me. And by the way, I have in the past. But he has to have actually done something wrong, or at least somebody actually that saw this happen claiming. I mean, to put it in terms of the Me Too movement, since that's something that's all fresh on our minds, that's kind of like the most recent Kavanaugh allegation. Remember? At least that person said, oh, I was there. This is like, well, I wasn't there, but I heard that there was a rumor going around on campus that this happened while I was there. Oh, I wasn't there. I was like at the library or something, but I heard it happened. These people will grab at any straw. They are so insanely desperate and out of their minds with anger to get rid of this guy. They'll just straight make an investigation out of whole cloth and not apologize for it, and continue to pursue it. The Trump derangement syndrome is real. Here's another theory on this. Why is it that Nancy Pelosi, who for the longest time was the wall, the person that was saying, no, we don't need to impeach, we don't need to impeach, she knows that impeachment is going to be something that is high risk, high reward. I mean, yes, if they succeed, and it's a very slim chance that they succeed, especially considering what all we've just looked at. If they actually succeed in this impeachment, they know or that is, there's such a minuscule chance that that happens that it's not worth pursuing it. And Nancy Pelosi is smart enough to understand that. And if they don't succeed, then they look like the idiots, and that will severely hurt them in the upcoming election. So why is it that Nancy Pelosi all of a sudden caves? Here's what I think is going on. And keep in mind that I used to be in a fraternity. I was the standards chair, which meant it was my job to go around the house, and we had a dry house. It was a Christian fraternity. It was my job to go around the house and make sure that they didn't have anything they weren't supposed to in their rooms. That included things like tobacco, alcohol, any other kind of drugs. You can always tell when you're about to find something, a stash or something, when all of a sudden you see the person tense up. You see them starting to freak out when all of a sudden you get to a certain drawer or a certain closet or a certain container and you pop it open, you can see their reaction that you're about to hit pay dirt. And, out of the hundreds of room inspections I did, I think I busted 2 guys because they had a bottle of Jack Daniels. So I'm not a person that just went around looking to bust people. But my point in all of that is, they start panicking. They start going, no, not that one. Not that one. They don't care if you look through all the others. They really care when you look at that one that they know the stuff is in. And you can tell that that's the one you really need to check because that's how they reacted to it. This is especially true with really small children that don't have a lot of impulse control and can't act. And so they, if you find something in their room they know they're not supposed to have, they'll really react to you going to that one drawer that they know the stuff is in. Well, I think this is what happened to Nancy Pelosi. Could be wrong. But I think the reason that all of a sudden Nancy Pelosi did a complete 180 overnight and decided, nope, this is worth going after Trump on, I think it's because Trump, whether he understood what he was doing or not, he found the drawer. And the drawer is the Ukraine. He's about to bust that puppy open, and the Democrats, who were all over the Ukraine in 2016, have all kinds of infrastructure set up. And $1.8 billion of taxpayer money just vanished. And by the way, Donald Trump and the server he mentioned in the call to the Ukrainian president, it's the same server that James Comey was looking for. It was the same server that our intelligence community abroad was looking for in Ukraine. It's the same DNC server. I think what happened is that something big went down in the Ukraine that we don't know about yet, or maybe just have an inkling about, like all the stuff with Joe Biden and his son. And Donald Trump got really close to blowing the lid off of that, and the Democrats are freaking out because of it. Could be wrong, but it's a theory. And if that theory holds out, it explains why all of a sudden Nancy Pelosi, who had been dead set against impeachment, decided, yeah, maybe it's time to start thinking about impeachment. It's just a thought, but I think that it's the case. But either way, everything in that whistleblower complaint that we read the other day, every part of it has been thoroughly debunked, which is a perfect example of why you don't listen to secondhand information. The intelligence community needs to change the rule back to where if you do enter into a whistleblower complaint, that's fine, great, we need to know that stuff. Regardless of who the president is, regardless of who the complaint hurts, we need to know that stuff. You have to have actually seen it yourself. You have to have actually read the transcripts, been present when the call was made, been present when whatever you're complaining about was taking place. You have to have first-hand information, because otherwise we're not going to waste our time and money chasing after things that may or may not have happened. I mean, yeah, sometimes you don't get a conviction. Sometimes it turns out even the whistleblower that did have first information was wrong, but at least then you've got somebody that is saying, yeah, I did see this. We can't go chasing after every random rumor that pops up around the water cooler in the office. Let's go to the Daily Dose of Stupid.
No, you messed it up. You're stupid.
And for today's Daily Dose of Stupid, the entire city of New York That's right. The entire city of New York is our focus of today's Daily Dose of Stupid, which I know should come as no surprise to any of you. So this is from a Fox News article that I read earlier today, and I quote, New York City's Commission on Human Rights announced on Thursday that residents could face up to $250,000 in fines if they use terms such as illegal alien with intent to demean, humiliate, or harass a person. Threatening to call ICE when motivated by discrimination, derogatory use of the term illegal alien, and discrimination based on limited English proficiency are unlawful discriminatory treatment under the NYC human rights law, the announcement read. Okay, so several observations I have from that short little paragraph. First of all, New York City has a Commission on Human Rights? When did that happen? I mean, maybe that's something that's been around for a while, but to my knowledge, that's a new thing. And it sounds dangerously close to their neighbors on the north, Canada. Because for those of you that have been paying attention, Canada has a human rights tribunal. And these are the people that go around to people, including comedians, that have human rights tribunal for saying things that are offensive and then fine those people or send them to jail. They're basically the free speech Gestapo of Canada. And they do. They ruin people's lives in their careers over saying something that they deem as offensive. The biggest hot button issue of late by the Human Rights Tribunal are transgenders. So if somebody's a dude and he looks like a dude and he's dressed like a dude and has a full beard and everything, and Adam's apple and big hands and everything, and you say, hey, that's a man, but he wanted to be referred to as a woman, then you can be dragged in front of a human rights tribunal and tried. Now, I don't know if New York City's Human Rights Commission has that same kind of power, but it sounds very similar, and knowing the people of New York, it would not shock me if that is the direction that they are heading. So that's the first big red flag. The second, illegal alien is a perfectly legitimate, legally sound term. They are an alien in that they are not from this country, which, by the way, is, again, not offensive. I'm going to Ukraine in a week. Once I am there, I will be an alien. Now, I'll be legal because I came in with a passport and I have a visa. But the point is, I'll still be an alien. I am an alien to the Ukraine. And it's not just that country. If I went to Canada or Mexico, I would still be an alien in their country. Nothing wrong with that. The country's not trying to dehumanize me or rob me of my human dignity by calling me an alien. I am an alien while I'm there because I'm not from there. I'm from here. I don't understand why this is such a big problem. The truth is, a lot of the people that are coming here, even the illegal immigrants, most of them aren't offended by that. The white liberals, they're the ones that are having an issue with it. That's by and large the truth. The white liberals that feel guilty about every little person that gets offended at every little thing, they're the ones that have a problem with the term, not the people themselves. And when it comes to illegal, well, they are illegal if they're not here legally, if they went through no legal process and broke a law to come here, which, regardless of what liberals want it to be, it is still against the law. That is illegal. If you were squatting on somebody's property, if you just showed up on their property and trespassed, you would be an illegal occupant. It's not dehumanizing anybody. In fact, even though I won't go in depth on this because I did it in a previous segment, referring to somebody as an illegal actually, oddly enough, humanizes them. A dog cannot break a law. It's a dog. A bug cannot break a law because it's a bug. If you are saying that someone is illegal, if someone is breaking the law, you are implying that they have what? Free will and a moral compass, that they're not just living off of instinct like an animal. And so actually, ironically enough, even though you are attributing something negative to them because you're saying that they're doing something wrong by saying that they are illegal, you are actually humanizing them more. But anyway, this is one of my big takeaways from this too. I find it strange that you have to use terms illegal alien with intent to demean, humiliate, or harass a person. How the heck are you going to determine intent in that? How? How are you going to read the person's mind with your are you going to get Charles Xavier there to dive into their mind to figure out what they wanted to do when using the term illegal alien? That's impossible to do. And so not only is it one of two things is going to happen there. Either you're going to enforce it so broadly that you're going to say, well, basically everybody that's using it is intending to use it in a hurtful way, or it'll be unenforceable and you won't be able to prove that anybody was using it in that manner, and so nobody will be hit by the law. But either way, well, I guess the third option is you enforce the law, but you enforce it only when you want to, which is, another likely outcome, unfortunately, in New York City. But the point is, it's not decisive enough. It's not clear enough. This isn't a good law, especially a criminal law. Vagueness in the law is rarely, if ever, a good thing. And another point, one of the things that was brought up here is an intention to harass. Well, harassment is already illegal. It's illegal. So, by the way, the same kind of illegal that an alien is if they come here illegally. So, if you're harassing somebody, wouldn't they already be covered? I mean, if you're harassing an illegal alien by calling them an illegal alien and getting up in their face and actually engaging in the legal definition of harassment, then that's against the law already anyway. So why the new law? Just like it would be illegal to harass anyone, regardless of how you were doing it. If you were harassing someone, that is already illegal. It's a really strange thing that they're trying to do here. This is the second part of this. Quote, hate has no place here. A tweet from City of New York read, the city's announcement ticked off a list of offensive ways. Sorry, this is written weird. The city's announcement ticked off a list of offensive ways to address immigrants, including threatening to call Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, or harassing someone for their, quote, limited English proficiency. Well, again, harassing somebody because they can't speak English or for any other reason is already illegal, so I don't understand why this law has a purpose here. And second of all, threatening to call ICE? So you're now making it a crime to suspect somebody of a crime and call a law enforcement agency to check into that. Now, again, if you're doing it just to harass somebody, in other words, you just see a random Hispanic guy that is having trouble remembering an English word or something, and you're like, oh yeah, that guy's clearly an illegal immigrant, and that's all you have to go on, and you call ICE because of that, falsely reporting a crime is already a crime. There are already laws on the book to protect somebody from doing that. So, again, that it doesn't make any sense if that's what you're trying to do, if that's what you're trying to have this law in the books for. And so if all the scenarios that we've played out up until now, if all of this is the case, then why have the law in the first place? I believe there are two goals here. The first one, they're trying to scare people into reporting illegal aliens. That's what they're doing. And we've seen this with other protected groups. I remember I was doing a story, 2 or 3 years ago, it was a while back now, about there were people that were saying that they're afraid to report anybody that kind of looks Muslim for any suspicious activity because they're afraid that they'll be labeled a racist or that there were going to be laws against harassment that come and boomerang back around to them, which is understandable, but it kind of shoots a hole in the whole see something, say something thing. And they said that there were even some stories of police officers not following up on that because they believed that the person was doing so out of racism, and it might have could have saved some lives in some cases. But this is really where we've come to, where we've gotten so politically correct, we've gotten so worried about everybody's feelings that we're not doing common sense things. Because I don't want anybody, because of the color of their skin or their heritage, to be harassed by a law enforcement agency. I don't care if it's a Hispanic guy and ICE. I don't care if it's a white person and police officers or a black person and police officers. I don't care who it is or what the crime is. I don't want them to just be needlessly harassed by a person that doesn't like them. But all those things are already against the law. So if this law is being put into place, it only seems to have one of these two purposes. And like I said, the first one is they're trying to scare people into not reporting people to ICE. They're trying to keep people. They want to get them so worried that they might get in legal trouble if they do, and they turn out to be wrong, that now they're putting all these extra stipulations saying, by the way, you've got to basically have an airtight case already ready to go if you suspect somebody, and if you don't, we're going after you. Well, what do you think is going to happen to reported crimes or people that report reasonable suspicion of somebody being illegally in the country? Well, of course those reports are going to go down, which is exactly what this law is designed to do. The second possible motivation is that it is yet another way that the left is slowly chiseling away at free speech. We see it over and over again. Again, it goes back to the whole thing in Canada with the transvestites, and that's something that New York and other liberal cities have tried to enforce as well. I believe it was it Oakland that passed something just recently that if you're working in a workplace and you misgender somebody, you can face fines. I know that they've done that in LA and San Francisco. And so this is just one more way to try to slowly chip away at the First Amendment, to try to slowly bring you into compliance into their way of thinking. You remember, if you've read George Orwell's 1984, that this was one of the main themes of the book. One of the friends, not the main character, but the friends of the main character, one of the things that he did is he worked at the Ministry of Language. And his job was to eliminate words that were offensive. In fact, there's a really important part of that book where he talks about, well, a lot of people think that we're adding new words. Actually, most of what we do is taking words out, removing unnecessary words. And that's exactly what is going on here. They're trying to remove words from our lexicon to make it harder to communicate ideas. And that's what the left has wanted for a very, very long time. It's what the human rights tribunals in Canada have done. They're trying to take away speech that they deem unworthy. They don't want free speech. They don't want a diversity of ideas. They don't want a free exchange of people that think differently than they do. They want to be able to control what you're allowed to say and not allowed to say. It is a slap in the face to the First Amendment. Even if illegal alien as a term were something that was derogatory, I don't believe that it is, and I already made that case. But even if it was, people should still have the right to say it. I disagree with a lot of things that a lot of people say. I would even say I disagree with the majority of speech out there. Doesn't matter. They have a right to say it. And you know what? This is a sentiment that I've seen reflected on many different sides of the right. There are a lot of people on the right that I don't even necessarily agree with. But as a whole, the right is far more tolerant of divergent ideas and differences of opinion in the forms of speech than the left is. Nowadays, if you are trying to shut down speech, if you're trying to keep other ideas out of the public sphere, there's a really good chance that you're a leftist. And it's hilarious to me that they're constantly labeling people fascist when that's one of the first things that a fascist always does. Make sure that nobody that disagrees with him is allowed to voice their opinion. That's exactly what the left has been doing for years now. Let's go to the chaplain's report.
In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Chaplain Corps. Under the command of General George Washington, each soldier was required to attend worship service every Sunday. While other armies advanced on their feet, Washington's troops advanced on their knees. It's time for the Chaplain's Report with Caleb Colquitt on tactics.
Our chaplain's report today, it stems off of something that I was reading, and by the way, you'll be familiar with this guy if you pay attention to conservative media and conservative circles. You know the PragerU University. The PragerU videos, that's actually put together by a guy named Dennis Prager. Now, Dennis Prager is a Orthodox Jew. He's been teaching the Torah for a really long time, and I recently picked up one of his books. It's called The Rational Bible Genesis, because he's doing one for every book of the Pentateuch, and so Genesis, of course, is the first one. Now, one of the things that I find fascinating about this, because I like getting other opinions and I like seeing things from other perspectives, and I'm actually going to point out something in what Dennis Prager is saying, is I was reading through, and I just started it, Genesis 1:1 and his takeaway from it, which there's basically an entire chapter just on this one verse, but we'll go ahead and read it, and I'm going to point out some of the things that he points out and sort of elaborate on it. So this is Genesis 1:1. We're all familiar with it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This may be the part of it that you may not be familiar with. The Hebrew word for God is Elohim, except in this particular form, it's the male, because I know that this is something that's sort of foreign to English speakers, but most languages actually have male and female versions of words. And in this particular one, this word, God, Elohim, is male, and it's also plural. They didn't use the singular for God here. And then the second word used here, created, that's bara. And I hope I'm not butchering that, but I probably am. And what's fascinating about that is it's the male singular form. So there seems almost to be a contradiction within the first verse of the Bible. Why? Now, if you were an Orthodox Jew, actually, you don't even have to be an Orthodox Jew. If you're just a Jew and you have gone through a bar mitzvah, you know that one of the first things that they teach you is Deuteronomy 6. You actually have to memorize that passage in Hebrew. And the way that it starts out is, the Lord your God is one God. So why is it that the religion that is famous for essentially coming up with the idea of monotheism, and their core principle, the thing that they teach every man when he comes of age, and that they kind of make this the most important passage they have, they make it the Lord your God is one God. And remember that Deuteronomy, another book of the Pentateuch, was also penned by Moses. So was Moses crazy and he couldn't remember that there's only one God? Or is there some funny business going on in Genesis 1? That doesn't seem to make any sense. Why would he use the plural of God when talking about who created the earth? And then on top of that, why would he change it to the singular in the verb? And it's interesting that Hebrews is one of the only the only language in the world that has male and female for its verbs. So I find this fascinating that those two things don't seem to add up, except in the New Testament. Jewish scholars for thousands of years have debated this and have not found a good answer. There's some speculation, there's some theories, but there's not really a solid definitive answer on this. Unless you know your New Testament. Because if you look in Colossians 1:15 through 16, here's your answer. He, talking about Jesus here, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on the earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. See, that brings everything together. Because the Godhead, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, that would be plural. And so it would make sense that when they're talking about in the beginning God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, created, singular. Because as we just learned from the book of Colossians, Yes, God is the creator of all, but that creation took place through Jesus Christ. It was Jesus Christ, the singular person that is part of the Godhead, through whom all things were created, as we just learned from Colossians. And so that just brings all the pieces right into place. It makes it fit, just like a glove. And there's a great observation from C.S. Lewis. To be honest, I read so much Lewis, I sometimes get which book, what he said, and which book it comes from, what reference it's from. I get those mixed up from time to time because there's so much good in there, and I've read so much of it. So I don't remember where this reference is from, but I know that it was Lewis that said it. He said that the way that you would know that this was not something that was constructed by man, the way that you would know that the New Testament really is the fulfillment, the completion of the Old Testament, is if you were looking at it like a book and you were reading things in the first part of the book, you were reading things that seemed to foreshadow some things or some things that didn't really make sense. If that were the case and the author came out with a sequel to the book or a lost last chapter, something like that, the way that you would know whether it was authentically by the same author or this was just a fan fiction thing is if you had seen him laying the groundwork in the first volume. If all of a sudden that last chapter makes other things that happened earlier in the book make sense, and not just in a way that it makes sense with the new version or the new chapter, but other things internally in the first volume make more sense now that you have the light of the second. Well, only God could do that. You would have to assume that were written by the same author, because nobody could have cooked that up. You couldn't have two people that worked that out, much less 66 books by 40 authors over thousands of years. And yet, we just looked at Genesis 1:1, which was written thousands of years before Paul penned Colossians. And Paul, with just a couple of simple verses, makes that first verse make sense. No human being could have pulled that off. It is one of the great internal proofs in the Bible that it could have only been orchestrated by an almighty, all-knowing, all-seeing God. God in three persons, yet as one, who created the earth through his Son, Jesus Christ. That's the only way that Genesis 1:1 actually makes sense. It brings everything else into full view. Stay the course, friends.
Tactics is a production of News Radio 1440 and Cumulus Media Montgomery. Any opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Cumulus Media. The theme song for Tactics is 6 Foot Town by Big and Rich. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Broadcast studios provided by Cumulus Media Montgomery. Location studios provided by the Dalraida Church of Christ. Copyright 2019.